One of my favorite theme parks is Epcot. The first time I visited was in 1999. I was 5 years old and my first time out of Australia was luckily to visit Walt Disney World. Out of all of the parks at Walt Disney World, I remember Epcot the most. It was unique, inspiring and different. An unexpected escape from Disney on Disney property. Sure, I was a Disney kid, but I wasn't huge on it. I wasn't really huge on anything except for perhaps technology and surprise. That's what Epcot was all about. I remember hanging out under the jump-in fountains, drinking the different sodas around the world, exploring the pavilions with their different themes, and watching a giant globe magically appear on a lake surrounded by fire and fireworks at night during illuminations. And to my surprise, when I visited again in 2015, these were all things I could still do. Over the years, Epcot has barely changed, which is probably why I still think of the park so fondly. I'm still able to do many of the things that my family talked about and got so excited for, and though we don't really share a common interest in theme parks, for some reason we shared a common interest in Epcot. You can experience the Disney magic at Magic Kingdom or Disneyland. Hollywood Studios was great, but we have Movie World in Australia, and when Animal Kingdom first opened, it was a really nice zoo with some rides. But Epcot, you can't get that anywhere else. But then again, what the heck is Epcot? It started as an experimental prototype community of tomorrow. It was one of Walt Disney's dreams to build not a theme park, but a community which would promote humanity's progression, utilizing the latest innovations in both city building and technology. As an experimental prototype, the community would only contain around 20,000 residents, but would aim to help lay the foundation for future cities to thrive. After the construction of Disneyland, the Disney company realized that only 5% of customers came from across the Mississippi River, leaving a potential 75% of the American population untapped. The idea of an East Coast Disneyland quickly developed into plans, but Walt promised to do things differently this time around. He wanted more control over his projects and the land it sat on. The Disney company knew that if they started purchasing up land under their name, then any neighboring land would quickly skyrocket in price to capitalize on the Disney fortunes. To counter this, Disney created several dummy companies and started buying up what was considered useless swampland in Central Florida, which would eventuate into the Disney Florida project. This project's scope was incredible and included a regional airport, welcome center, industrial park, the Magic Kingdom, and most importantly, the immense original design for Epcot, which would be approved and funded by the Floridian government under the condition that the Magic Kingdom be built first. In 1965, the Disney Florida project was announced to the public. But sadly, 5 years before the Magic Kingdom could even be finished, Walt Disney passed away at the end of 1966. Construction hadn't started yet, but Walt Disney's brother Roy took over the planning and went ahead with the project, emphasizing that Epcot would be built. It was a grand idea, but without the leadership and vision of Walt, the board of the Walt Disney Company just felt it wasn't in the business of city building and management. The community concept was scrapped, but Epcot lived on. On October 1st, 1982, Epcot Center opened to the public. This new iteration echoed the sentiments of Walt Disney, but was wildly different in its execution. The park was split into two main areas, Future World and World Showcase. Future World was covered in pavilions that focused on the betterment of humanity through progress and technology, whilst World Showcase featured pavilions dedicated to countries and cultures around the world, with intricate, careful detail. Most interestingly, Epcot featured barely any Disney characters, and focused on establishing their own narratives within their lands and rides, which really allowed the park to stand out with its own unique personality. The park was likened to a permanent World's Fair, and it captured the hearts and minds of many who visited. But unfortunately, Disney fell into the trap of tomorrow once again, and this time around it was much harder to hide. Future World was an idealistic look at tomorrow's technology and advances, but it wouldn't take long for that technology to catch up. Eventually, what once wowed guests was just another part of life, and towards the turn in millennia, Disney just lacked the resources and finances to keep up. Over time, Future World started to become worse for wear, and being the entrance to the park, it was greatly obvious to guests that this was the case. With timeless architecture and careful design, the dissonance between World Showcase and Future World was shocking. And there's a clear line across the park from where it shines and where it's Future World. Buildings and attractions around Future World appeared to be updated haphazardly, with mixed focus and visions. The additions and changes weren't necessarily bad, they just lacked the spirit of the original Epcot. Though the other possible outcome was even worse, with many buildings and rides simply becoming unceremoniously closed and many left within view of guests. Though this gave Epcot a certain charm, because many areas just felt static in time. And perhaps this is why I fell in love with the park again almost 15 years later when I visited in 2015. It was pretty much the same Epcot. It gave me a rare opportunity to relive a part of my childhood static in time in an ever-changing world. Many of the exact same attractions and shows which my family and I experienced together in 1999 were still there. I could drink sodas around the world, experience the globe cross the lake in illuminations, feel American patriotism firsthand in the American adventure, and go back in time inside what my family called the giant golf ball. But I also noticed what was gone. Not because I remembered it well, but because I could see it. Wonders of Life was one of my favorite areas in Epcot, and it's still there, just abandoned. As a tactile, hyperactive child, I loved the interactive Museum of Innovations, but it had become giant wooden panels and meet and greets. I could look past these flaws as an Epcot fan, but as a theme park fan, it left me wanting more. The misguided Future World was in desperate need of a major overhaul to just tie everything together and tidy up the mess. On August 25th, 2019, at the D23 Expo in Anaheim, California, we got just that. Disney announced that Epcot would be receiving a transformation and made it clear that they would respect the original vision and spirit for the park. Future World would be split into 3 different worlds. World Celebration will hold the entrance plaza and Spaceship Earth, as well as new festival space for Epcot. World Nature on the western side would focus on understanding and preserving the beauty, awe, and balance of the natural world. Opposite to this was World Discovery, which would hold all the thrill attractions for Epcot, with new visions toward the future which would include Space 220, a restaurant simulating what it's like to be 220 miles above the Earth in a space station. Though the most shocking announcement for me was a little earlier back in 2018. On September 18th, Disney announced that a new show would be replacing Illumination's Reflections of Earth. I visited my first theme park shortly after this show had opened, on October 1st, 1999. One of those parks was Epcot. It will close later this year after 20 years of inspiring guests. If I think of all that I've done, the skills I've learned, the people I've met, the challenges I've stood up to, and the challenges I've turned down, who I've become can all be condensed into 20 years. The last time I visited Epcot was in February of this year, 2019, the same year that Illuminations will be closing. It was for my honeymoon. Our second last day of the trip was spent at the park, and I knew what was coming with recent rumors and announcements, and I said my goodbyes. We watched Illuminations that night, and it closed the park. As the crowds faded into their cars and buses and monorails, I stood there, staring over the lake. As you can probably tell, with a channel dedicated entirely to theme parks, they mean a lot to me. And this moment meant a lot to me as well. What the heck is Epcot? Epcot is grounded in the sentiments of a legendary man with visions too large for any other minds to take on. It's hopeful for the future and aims for greener pastures even when we ourselves cannot. It's tried and failed, but most importantly, continued to move forward even when it knew it misstepped. It's learned from its mistakes and grown stronger because of it. And much like this video, it too can be corny. For ReviewTyme, I'm Dominic, and all of this is Epcot.
Epcot will take its cue from the new ideas and new technologies that are now emerging from the creative centers of American industry. It will be a community of tomorrow that will never be completed, but will always be introducing and testing and demonstrating new materials and new systems.